The information shared in this episode is not intended to serve as a substitute for mental health services and is only intended to provide education and information to you, the listener. Thank you for tuning in to the Honeybee Podcast. Today's episode is inspired by the holiday season. All over the world, within various cultures and religious beliefs, there is some sort of celebration towards the end of the year. The media would have many of us believe that the holiday season is filled with warm, positive, pleasant family interactions, going to different events, family members' homes, really delighting with one another, having a phenomenal time together as a family. And the truth is, most of us have a family member or two or five who can rub us the wrong way and totally take us out of our flow of positive energy. With that in mind, I am happy to say that I have an expert here, Anita Washington, who has her master's in education and in business administration, on the show to explain to us ways that we can be skillful around family members with whom we may have a toxic relationship with. Anita is the host of the TV show That Anita Live and the Emotional Happiness Podcast, which provides a platform for women to learn, laugh, and more importantly, heal emotionally by learning from the challenges and successes of others. Anita Washington is a former school and community agency counselor and creator of the 7-Step Method, which she will share with us today. Anita has helped guide people from the ages of 11 to 50 through their own life issues, personal transformations, and professional endeavors. Her most recent project, which she is very proud of, is the publishing of her second book, Family is Not Everything: How to Minimize Their Mess and Maximize Your Happiness. Without further ado, here is my chat with Anita. Thank you so much for joining the Honeybee Podcast. I have the good fortune of sharing space with Anita Washington, who will be chatting with me today about how we can, during the holiday season, which is happening at the time of this recording, how we can successfully and skillfully navigate relationships with our family members around this time that may be toxic, unpleasant, or dysfunctional in nature. Anita's going to share lots of wisdom with us, and I'm very excited to have you here, Anita, to help us with this conversation. You know, again, at the time of this recording, it is the holiday season all over the world for many different people celebrating different aspects of the holidays within their own culture. And so many of us have this image in our head about what that is supposed to look like. So when I think of holiday time, I think of big families and everybody's smiling and we're having this big meal and we're connected and everybody's just joyful and gleeful. And I'm sure that that has much influence has come from the media, watching different movies, TV shows, and the like. In reality, though, most of us have the experience of the holiday season being unpleasant for whatever reason. For many of us, we have family members we just have unpleasant relationships with. And I think that there is this expectation that in spite of whatever unpleasant, dysfunctional, or toxic relationships we have within our family, because it's holiday season and because they're family, we have to socialize with them. And so I would love to know what you think about all of that and what information you could offer our listeners today.
Well, first of all, thank you very much for having me on your podcast. I greatly appreciate you sharing your audience with me. The holidays is a very contradictory time because, as you said, during the holidays, we get a lot of the good cheer from all of the songs. Usually when you're in the malls, everything is packed, people in a good mood. Yet, and still, there are a lot of people that suffer in silence because their home base, where they were born and raised, is dysfunctional. So whether it was through domestic violence, parent neglect, molestation, all of these different social ills that tear apart our communities don't disappear during the holidays. So as victims or survivors, we have to figure out either how to handle the holidays with toxic family in the best manner possible, or make the tough decision to dispose of that dysfunction and choose ways to stay away from it.
And I appreciate you saying that because more often than not, there is a secrecy associated with trauma that can occur within family relationships.
You do not break that family code. Nobody
Exactly. Like whatever happens in this house stays in this house.
stays in this
Tell
house.
anybody, then you are betraying the trust within the family or the bonds within the family because you're supposed to keep your mouth shut. And so even though allegedly keep your mouth shut, like that is the negative, exactly, the code, right? So with the holiday season coming up, again, it's this expectation of like, well, even though this happened, just act like it didn't happen and, come here and be gleeful with us. And so I'm going to share more with folks about your book towards the end. Something that stood out to me, and hopefully this is in alignment of the conversation. We're just going to see what happens with this. This really struck me because I think you're right on. You had said, or you wrote, every incident of trauma pushes your emotional boundaries back more because it increases your desensitization to being mistreated. And so with that in mind, and there being this expectation of keeping the code and keeping the secret, and in spite of you having this awful experience with this family member, you are supposed to numb your emotions and numb your wants and your needs and what's best for you and go along and get along rather. And so I guess I'm curious to know what you think about that, or what could you speak to about that aspect?
Well, I think as individuals, we have to remember that we are human.
Mm-hmm.
And in remembering that we're human, to thine own self be true. Do what is healthy for you, first and foremost. If going back into the environment, another occurrence is going to happen, consider whether or not that's the best choice for you to make. If there are other things that you can do, for instance, if only being in the midst of that person or the people that harmed you in a crowd is better than hanging back and being by yourself, or them tapping you and say, hey, let's go for a ride. And you know what that ride means. Have that courage and that confidence internally to thine own self to be true, to say, no, I'm not going. And last but not least, I like for everyone to try as many options as they can before they consider just avoiding this situation altogether. One of the terms that I use in my book that I use for myself often is called family of choice. And that is to be around a family that is healthier than yours. There's no such thing as a perfect family, but a family that is healthier than yours, where you can learn what true connections are and what true unconditional love is. It may be better for you to spend holidays in the midst of that family, where you can be in the midst and feel that love. So that, one, you feel safe enough to exhale and begin your own healing process. But two, you don't carry the negativity that was placed upon you into your own home with your kids or your husband or your wife or your partner, into your work environment, into your church environment, into your community. Because I like to say childhood trauma turns into adult dysfunctional behavior.
Yes.
So
I read that and I love that. Yes.
Listen
more about that.
Listen to the licensed clinical social worker over there saying hallelujah. Childhood trauma turns into adult dysfunctional behavior if you do not address it, if you do not become more self-aware, if you do not begin to exercise counseling techniques, or even to go into hardcore, whether it's outpatient therapy or inpatient therapy, depending on how deep your wounds go and how much they are negatively affecting your ability to live a normal life on a daily basis. You've really got to be honest with yourself. And what you don't confront, it will play out in other areas of your life. Maybe not in the same way, but it will play out. For instance, if you were molested, perhaps in your work environment, your attitude is just aggressive and you're angry with everybody. You're pushing new coworkers away. People, they come into the environment, they take the job with a good attitude, they come across you, and 6 months later, they're gone. That is something that you have to look in the mirror and confront for yourself. That has to go. You can't continue to live your life in that level of anger and hurt and aggression.
That is a phenomenal point. So, childhood trauma becomes adult dysfunctional behavior. Is that what you stated?
Yes.
Yes. And so, in the context of being around family members, whether it's a holiday time or not, that have maybe been the perpetrator of abuse, and knowing that that would be a trigger for many people, I would imagine that that would cause a really like an elevated amount of stress, anxiety, and fear, right? And
Yes.
so I love how you said that this follows you like wherever you go, there you are. And unless you bring that shadow part, like really looking at the trauma that one has experienced and doing some self-examination and even getting some therapeutic support if necessary, until that happens, there's going to be this dysfunctional pattern. And it may not show up the same way as the original trauma, but this pattern will occur.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And so you have invited listeners to consider other possibilities aside from just outright not going, like maybe getting with people who you stated it better than I'm about to, spending your time with people who are meaningful, who are trustworthy, who are not your biological family members necessarily, but they are your family.
Yes.
What other ideas do you have for people in the event, they're weighing their options as to, what, I just may not go at all? Well, before you just make that choice, what other ideas do you have for them?
They can sit down with a piece of paper and be completely honest with themselves about the different ways that they can handle the situation. One that I gave earlier was whether or not you can control the situation by always being in a crowd.
Right.
Which means that you're only in the home or in the midst of that person when there's 5 or more people. You don't stay at the house when you're visiting. You go and you stay in a hotel. You go and you stay with friends or with neighbors that are not connected to that family. Even if it's a sibling, mother, father, you still have your own individual friends that, because when we return home, a lot of the times we're returning to people that we went to high school with, people that we went to junior high with, people that we played sports with. A lot of those people are visiting, are still there during that very same time.
Exactly.
That's an option. Another option is know your baseline. If it's somebody that is continuously, they pick at you, it isn't necessarily physical abuse, but it's more mental and emotional, where they're constantly making you the butt of their jokes. They're constantly putting you down. They're insulting you at every chance that they get. Know your baseline. So when you feel your level begin to rise, you can take action. You can leave. You can warn the person, or something that I saw that worked very well. I don't know if I would have recommended it before I actually saw it play out, but you can bring it to the attention of everybody in the room.
Oh.
You're in the midst of family. Everybody in there is family, but they're all within their own cocoons. The cookers are in the kitchen, peeling and scraping and boiling and baking. The sports people are in one part of the house. You can stand up in a chair and say, look, I am not going to tolerate this behavior from this human being anymore. I am no longer the butt of his or her jokes. Go down the list of whatever it is and then explain to them, look, this is how this makes me feel. Either this behavior continues or I may have to take other options, which means this may be my last visit here.
That is a powerful visual image that I just had planted in my head, because that is a shift of power, and it is demonstrated very clearly. I'm going to stand on a chair, like you're going to see me. Hey, everybody, pay attention to this. I'm setting this boundary. I'm drawing the line, and I'm going to hold the line.
Yeah, and it worked excellent because everybody in the room got quiet and just looked like, okay, is this like a holiday prank? Are you joking? Are you serious? Does this really bother you? And they were able to courageously express, yes, this bothers me. We are no longer children. I don't like being treated like this in front of my children. This behavior needs to stop. And from that point forward, everybody else in the family began to pressure that person to discontinue that behavior. And eventually it stopped.
That is excellent. Great example. And I'm curious to know, could you speak more to, and this may be obvious to many people, and for those of us who would like to know more, what makes it important to know our individual baseline, like our level of tolerance? Why is that important in your opinion?
Because you must always remain in control. If you lose control, then you're losing the respect of the people around you. They may shut you off. They may ignore you. They may put you in the category of, oh, that don't mean nothing. They just going off again. When very seriously, internally to you, you are experiencing extreme pain, mentally, emotionally, or physically, whichever it is, because they are all violent to the person. So you get the opportunity to maintain that control. You get to decide how you calmly leave the room. You get to decide how you calmly and respectfully express yourself. And you get to decide when that access that person or those people have to you is discontinued.
Wonderful point. Thank you for explaining that. And I made mention of your book earlier in our conversation, and you have, in my opinion, phenomenal exercises for the reader to practice. And the title of your book is Family is Not Everything: How to Minimize Their Mess, Maximize Your Happiness, and Enjoy Emotional Baggage Breakthroughs. For those of us who will be going into these environments with family members who have perpetrated some form of trauma against us or otherwise toxic negative energy, you have beautifully explained how to practice 7 result driven techniques, how to practice 7 actionable activities, and you also offer the reader 7 affirmations. Can you speak more as to how one can learn how to transform negative thinking, negative energy into positive thinking and positive energy with those tools?
At the core of every one of those is becoming more self aware. In the 7 steps, life mapping, track and trace, those two, step 1 and step 2, are very closely tied because when you sit down and create a life map for yourself, meaning you go back as far back as you can remember and write down all of the various activities that happen. Some people do it based on the schools that they attended. Others do it based on the addresses they had. Some do it based on just the grade and the age that they were, and they can remember. I remember when I had this hobby, or when I took those piano lessons, or when I took these skating lessons. The third exercise is just to write them down. Don't get lost down memory lane. Don't get attached to the emotion. Just write them down. Write down as many as you can. The next thing you're going to do under the track and trace, that's where you actually look at the decisions that you make today. It could be done through journaling. Like you could journal straight for 60 days, 90 days, and look at the decisions that you made. Look at when you felt fear. Look at when you felt dismissed or ignored. And then go back to that life map. And you can begin to unlock a lot of the limiting beliefs that cause those feelings, or the limiting behaviors that you place on yourself, things that you don't have the confidence to go after or the courage to go after, that self-doubt that comes down as soon as you begin to think about experiencing or doing something new. If you can figure out what was the exact event in your past that caused that limiting belief, you can immediately unlock the hold that it has on your life. Once you unlock that, you are boundless. You can do whatever you set your mind to. The next step, dispose of distractions, is one that my clients find very, very difficult because I challenge them to write down all of the names in their phone, the people that they spend the most time around, and then they ought to carry that paper around. Whenever they talk to that person, whenever they're around that person, they have to go to that paper, write down the date and the emotion. How does talking to that person make you feel? How does being with that person make you feel? Everything from people in the office, people you have lunch with, different practices that you may take your kids to if you're sitting with other parents at that time, everybody. Because then that tells you, you go down a list, you look at all of those negative emotions. And at that point, you have a decision to make because you need to decide if you're going to limit the access or cut off the access of the people that make you feel the worst. You have to be honest with yourself if you want to break free of emotional baggage and move on with your best life. One of the activities, well, I listed the activities of life mapping, track and trace, but I guess my favorite one is closer to the back of the book, and where I really talk about fatherless daughters. And I challenge women to sit down with a deck of index cards. On the front of those cards, just one by one, write down all of the men that they had as elders. When I talk about the guys you dated,
We ain't ready for that one yet.
write down the elders that you had during your childhood, teen years, college years, whether it was coaches, fathers of neighbors, teachers, people in the church, whomever you spent time around. And then go back. And as you read the name, flip the card over and write what you remember about them. What did they teach you? What was something impactful that they may have said to you one day, or one day they protected you from something? Just that one little, no, you're not going this way, you're going that way. Or, you're not cutting class, go back to class, Nita. Just that one little finger, that reminder may have been a pivotal point that changed your entire life. And you're hung up on somebody who wasn't qualified for the position, trying to make them complete the duties and responsibilities versus taking a whole account of everybody that was there and did pour into you.
Yeah.
Because then once you separate those cards based on all of the good and you arrange them and look at all of the names, that is a collage of the father figure that you had from your childhood.
That's beautiful. I love that activity. That's beautiful.
We all have it. It's just that we have to dig in, reach out, and grab a hold to it, because all of the negativity that pours out in our society draws us to, pushes us towards, makes us attracted to the negative. All of the entertainment is full of drama. If it's not drama, people fighting, cussing, hollering, screaming, nobody's watching it.
Mm-hmm.
If it's, at work, nobody loves a day at work where just everything goes well. The squeaky wheel gets the oil. The complainer in the office always gets what they want.
And so then it's important to really evaluate these meaningful relationships, like weighing the pros and cons of continuing on in certain relationships, evaluating how these things affect us emotionally, mentally, energetically, and also being mindful of, not only focusing on the negative aspects of certain relationships, to your point about the Finding My Father collage, where you look at the different relationships that you've had with elder men, teachers, coaches, professors, and the like, that poured positive energy into you for those of us who want to craft something if we didn't have a relationship with our father. So that way we don't have that, for lack of better words, that emptiness there or that missing piece there.
Yes, because there's so many people that get up on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday and go into their places of worship. Doesn't matter which one it is, whether it's Christian, Muslim, Buddhist, Jehovah's Witness, it doesn't matter which one it is. We all get up and we go into our places of worship, but we don't really grab a hold to the word. Doesn't matter. Bible, Quran, Book of Mormon, doesn't matter. We don't really grab a hold to the word, because the Bible says the Lord will provide. And all of the major religions share the basic tenets. So I'm sure there are things in the Book of Mormon or in the Quran that have that same principle, where the Creator provides.
That's right.
So if you didn't really get a good deal of a father and a biological parent, that doesn't mean that what you were supposed to get from a father figure wasn't provided for your life.
Beautiful. Say more about that, please. Yeah.
You've got to look at what you practice, what you say you believe, what you spend your time and energy getting up, getting dressed, driving down there, how many times a day you pray, whether you say grace over your food, all of these practices and the symbolism that we have toward the constructions that we believe. Mm-hmm. Then when it comes to actually applying those words to our life, there's a disconnect somewhere. And we have to close that gap. We have to close that gap and begin to apply the word to our life. You're a creator. I'm Christian, so in mine, the Lord provides. And it even says in the Psalms, and where if my mother and father forsake me, the Lord will hold me close. It gets deep. It actually names the parents.
Yes.
It says if these two people don't do their job, don't worry, I got your back. So stop trying to force people to perform the duties and responsibilities of a job that they were not qualified to fill. And take a hold of the blessings that you have been given and move on with creating a better life for yourself, starting right now.
That is beautifully stated. That's inspirational and that is so encouraging. And you might have already attended to this. I'm going to ask you anyway, even if you're repeating yourself, I would love to hear it again. I like to ask people to share one kernel of truth or one nugget of wisdom with our listeners. And for you, I'm curious to know what your kernel of truth would be to offer us as well, or one nugget of wisdom.
I would have to say, especially this time of year where we're in the holiday season, to thine own self be true. To the deepest core of yourself, to thine own self be true. And it doesn't mean that you're selfish and set everyone else aside. But if you're constantly pouring out so that everybody else is filled, at what point do you feel yourself? You can't give your children a good parent if you're constantly pouring out. To thine own self be true. Some of us are in the sandwich generation and where they're taking care of elderly parents, but then they're also raising their own children.
Right.
And sometimes that happens all within the same house. Again, I have to remind you, to thine own self be true. At what point are you going to set aside some time to do your thing?
Right. Anita, I have to ask you, would you mind sharing with our listeners where they could get your book?
The book is available at Amazon and Barnes and Noble.
Congratulations. I'm going to be sure to put your information in the show notes, share with people in the outro the name again, title of your book. And I sincerely appreciate you for your time and willingness to speak on this very important topic and teaching people ways to navigate this sort of circumstance around this time of year and really any time of the year. Anita, thank you so much for your time and I hope you have a wonderful day.
Thank you very much for having me.
My pleasure.
And happy holidays.
Happy holidays to you too. I truly had a wonderful time chatting with Anita. In this episode, Anita shared with us lots of valuable strategies to help with our ability to successfully and skillfully manage interactions with family members with whom we may have a toxic, unpleasant relationship with. I have included the information for you in the show notes to find Anita as well as Anita's books. So please be mindful to check out the show notes. Please go to her website, which is That Anita Live. And while you are on the internet looking up her website, please go to my website, which is myhoneybeetherapy.com. So you are able to read up on my latest blog posts, as well as catch up with any old podcast episodes that you might have missed when they originally dropped, and just to kind of see what I've been up to. Again, I sincerely appreciate you for tuning in to the Honeybee Podcast. And until next time, peace.